Hello, my name is Richard at Hope. Thank you for asking, how did addiction start? In the Bible, when Noah got off of the ark, he planted vineyards, among other things, and in the process of the harvesting, he created wine, and he got himself intoxicated, inebriated, and that was about 4,350 years ago. That crescent that's formed from the Nile arching around down the Euphrates into the Gulf is what's called the Fertile Crescent. Residents there were Sumerians and Egyptians, that they used a lot of fermented foods. Three of these were bread, wine, and beer. They also had what they called the joy plant, which we now know produced heroin. There's some examples of it being inhaled, but it probably, if it was inhaled, it was smoked. Fermentation process was not understood, and so it was considered as given to them by the gods. And the Greeks had Dionysius, was the god of grapes and wine, and in Rome became Bacchus. Also, there's an old medicine that was used in more modern form. It's called paregoric, although in ancient times, instead of being made with distillates, it was made by wine, and they would put oils in it, healing oils like camphor and anise. In the 9th century, distillation was invented, and one of the advantages of distillation is that you can remove a lot of the water from fermented grains and fermented grapes, and you have a more concentrated alcohol, and it raised it from 3 or 4 up to about 20%. Made it easier to ship. It also made it easier to use alcohol as a vehicle for carrying medicine into the body. So up until the 17th century, there was not much said about in public intoxication. It's well known that the very wealthy, the royalty, had access to beer and wine in whatever abundance they wanted, and intoxication was fairly common there. But among the common people, it was not, because it was generally very expensive and scarce. The coming of the Age of Enlightenment in the 17th century, which combined advances from the Renaissance with Greek and Roman learning, and removing faith as a controlling factor in science. Science was then to be studying nature for whatever nature would tell us. And so the focus was on looking for causes and effects in all natural processes and not ascribing them to faith. The use of alcohol was mostly for ritual and medicinal uses, and famine and hunger was common throughout nearly all the ages. There would be a year where there was a plenty, and then there would be years of starvation and hunger and death, and then it would have years of plenty. And this just kept weather conditions, partly due to diseases and partly due to insects and so forth, all these factors that man did not understand or did not have the ability to control. And 90% of the people were used to produce food for the 10% and for themselves. And this was true up until the beginning of the 18th century. And at the Age of Enlightenment had added new tools, for farming, new equipment, new designs for machinery, for harvesting and preserving, and all these things were growing and changing rapidly, which was making food more readily available for everyone. It started in England as a wheat crop was so large. They could not export all the wheat that they were growing, that the English government urged them to ferment wheat and to distill it. So you see a number of famous Irish and British distillation and fermentation companies are set up in the 18th century, and distillation was now industrialized, so that large quantities of high percentage alcohol could be produced and shipped all over the world. And that is essentially when we begin to see public intoxication, because now the ordinary man can have for himself drinks of some whiskey or something like that. You didn't have to drink too much whiskey in order to get a buzz on. In 19th centuries, the prevailing opinion was that inebriation is a moral problem. Because of this, some communities passed laws prohibiting public intoxication. Imprisonment and public humiliation by stocks was used for punishment. Also, excise tax on alcohol was passed in the 18th century to prevent excessive use and to become a major support for the U.S. government. In the 19th century, alcohol use rose with industrialization and personal wealth. A pledge for the temperance movement may go something like this: wine is a marker, strong drink is raging, and whosoever is deceived whereby is not wise. At this time, substance use was called inebriation. The 19th century was also the heyday of patent medicines. Most liquid ones had a base of alcohol or flavored water. The active ingredients were extracts from cocoa leaf, koala berries, and heroin. Medical oils were sometimes also added in the alcohol mixtures. These medicines added to the inebriation problem. You can also see that the cost of shipping this was much lower, and also the roads had been improved to make them all-season roads. It used to be that in times of heavy rains or in the springtime, the roads were impassable, and so villages and towns would be pretty much isolated from one another. But the value of all-seasons roads is that whatever is produced could be shipped any time of the year. And so wagons got larger because the roads got better. The microscope was invented, and when they looked at the mash used for producing whiskey, they saw lots of little creatures swimming around in there that they, not having another name, called them beasties, because they looked like little tiny beasts that were swimming around in the mash. Well, we know these today as microbes. It was discovered that fermentation was not a miracle from the gods, so it became known that microbes were causing the fermentation process and making alcohol. So that limited how much alcohol could be in a mix, be toxic for the microbes. So what distillation did was enable the removal of the water from that mixture when the microbes were no longer able to work and to concentrate the alcohol. So this got even better through the 18th century and into the 19th century. And we find in the middle of the 19th century an awareness of the damage that was being done from alcoholism to families, to industrial production. People were arriving to work drunk in the morning. They were unsafe in running machines, lots of injuries and so forth. You can just imagine a little bit what it was like. By the middle of the 19th century, it was first addressed by the inebriate asylum in Binghamton, New York, based on a model that was developed for people who were insane in England. Where they would build a building with two wings, and they would put the new entrance out at the ends of the wings, and they would move them towards the middle as they got better and better. So it was a combination of social, long-term residential care. Thank you so much for listening, and come back to the website and look again, and there'll be another video or two.